If you feel that you are stuck in the same patterns, in relationships, money, a sense of lack, or constant inner tension, this film can give you something very concrete, a tool to change what sets your reality from the inside. In a moment, I will show you how Neville Goddard's law of assumption works and why it is not your actions that are the key, but your identity, who you are internally when no one is watching. What will you gain from watching this film? First, you will understand why, despite your efforts, you keep returning to the same results. Second, you will learn how to recognize your own hidden assumptions that sabotage your goals, even when your intentions are good. Third, you will receive a simple way to work with the evening and the moment before sleep to calm the mind, shift your inner state, and begin to see change in practice, in how people react to you, in your decisions, and in the opportunities that suddenly start to appear. In this film, we will go through the essence of Neville's teachings, what I am is, why the world behaves like a mirror of your consciousness, and how to enter a state in which what you want becomes natural, without struggle, without obsession, and without constantly asking, when will this finally work? Let's begin. The law of assumption, in Neville's understanding, is not a technique, but a description of how human experience functions at all. When people say manifestation, they often mean a process of acquiring a relationship, money, a house, or recognition. Neville shifts the focus entirely elsewhere. It is not about acquiring. It is about the external world being like a screen on which your inner state is projected. An assumption is not a single thought. It is rather a psychological climate in which you live. It is that quiet certainty that tells you, this is how life is, or this is just who I am, or it will always be this way. And that certainty works like a filter. Through it, you interpret everything. Through it, you choose what you notice. Through it, you react. And then reactions create consequences. At this point, Neville does something uncomfortable for many people. Instead of asking, why is the world doing this to me? He asks, what assumption within me makes this my world? Not to accuse you, but to give you back the steering wheel. Because if the source is an inner state, then change is possible, not by controlling people and events, but by changing the level of consciousness from which you meet them. The most deceptive assumptions are the ones you never name. For example, I have to work hard to get anything, or love requires suffering, or money is for others. They then become the background you call realism, and at that point, you realistically begin to live in a world that confirms them. Neville repeated that an assumption you persist in, even if at first it seems contradictory to what you see, eventually becomes a fact in experience. This is the foundation of the law of assumption. The world catches up to the state. Neville was fascinated by two words, I am. And he did not mean language. He meant ontology, the nature of being. I am is the pure sense of existence before you attach labels to yourself. Before you say, I am tired, I am lonely, I am unlovable, before you create a story. Now pay attention. Most people use I am as a tool of self-diagnosis. They say, I am this way because life made me this way. Neville reverses this order. Life unfolds this way because your I am is set this way. This is easy to test in everyday life. If you enter a room with an inner I am invisible, you will behave slightly more quietly, slightly more cautiously, marginally more as if you do not have the right to take up space. And suddenly, the world seems to confirm that you are invisible. Someone interrupts you, someone overlooks you, someone does not ask your opinion. And in your mind appears the thought, I knew it. And that I knew it is cement. If, on the other hand, you enter with, I am important, my presence has weight, your posture changes, your tone changes, your eyes change, and your patience changes. And the world reacts differently, sometimes immediately, sometimes through a series of bridges of incidents, but surprisingly consistently. Neville wrote and spoke about changing the feeling of I. That means not only changing thoughts, but also changing the core of identity. Thoughts are like leaves, and the feeling of I is like the root. If the root is I do not deserve, the leaves can say I deserve, and nothing happens, because the inner current flows from a different place. This is also why someday I will be often does not work. Sometime I will be keeps you in the state of I am not now. And consciousness operates in the present. That is why Neville emphasized the state of fulfillment, the state of having, the state of already being, not pretending, but as inhabiting a new version of yourself. For Neville, imagination was not a childish toy nor an escape from reality. It was the tool through which consciousness shapes experience. And now something important. People hear imagination and think fantasy. Neville was talking about something else. The ability to enter a state that is psychologically real before it becomes physically visible. It is a prototype in the mind. If you can feel life from the level of this already is, then you begin to live as if it were natural. And life responds to what feels natural. Here, it is worth adding a broader perspective. As Neville was not the only tradition to speak to the creative role of imagination. In Sufi mysticism, there is a strong theme of the world of imagination as an intermediate space between spirit and matter, not as illusion, but as a real layer of experience where forms begin to take shape before they solidify into events. In Hermetic traditions, you will find the idea that the foundation of reality is mental and that what we call the world is an expression of consciousness. This is not a scientific description of physics. It is metaphysical language that surprisingly well matches the psychology of experience. What exists in the mind as a pattern begins to seek confirmation in form. And now, the most crucial point. Neville taught that imagination works effectively when it is not under tension. When it is not, I have to do this correctly. When it is a calm entry into a state. That is precisely why he spoke so strongly about working in moments when consciousness is soft and the inner critic is quiet. And that leads us to sleep. Neville loved the moment just before sleep. He called it a state akin to sleep. This is the time when the body is already relaxing, the logical mind is losing sharpness, and you still retain a small degree of awareness. It is a transitional state. You are no longer fully alert as during the day, but you have not yet drifted away completely. Why does this have such power? Because in this state, your inner stage becomes more suggestible. Images carry greater emotional weight, and emotional weight acts like a seal. What is emotionally charged settles more easily into the subconscious as truth. Here, it is helpful to add a scientific lens that explains the mechanism without mystifying it. Contemporary approaches to the mind often describe the brain as a system that does not so much see the world as continuously predict it and then adjust perception to those predictions. In other words, your beliefs and internal models have a tangible impact on what you consider obvious and how you respond. Sleep and dreams are often interpreted as times when the brain works on models, simulates them, and updates them, sometimes without the constraints of everyday logic. This does not mean that sleep magically manifests. It means that sleep is a powerful time when internal patterns can be reset, because the critical gate is more open. Neville understood this intuitively, long before science began to describe it in theories. That is why he taught, fall asleep in the state you want to be accurate. Do not fight the day. Place a new pattern into the night. This is the point at which many people drop off. They do visualizations, affirmations, and rituals, and then the day comes when tension builds inside them. And that tension is like a signal, I do not have. And if inside there is I do not have, then the baseline state remains lack. And lack has its consequences. The most common mistake is treating practice like a button. I press it, and it should happen. Neville taught that this is the path to frustration, because practice is not meant to force a result. Practice is meant to change identity, and identity only later changes experience. That is why 3 days of visualization often end with someone checking their phone and finding no message. And then drama appears. And drama is a state. And the state reproduces a world of drama. It is a vicious circle. Neville would say directly, "Do not check whether it is working." If you are checking, it means you are not in the state of having. You are in the state of waiting. And waiting is a subtle form of lack. And here is a topic few people speak about honestly. Not everyone is ready at the beginning for immediate, big manifestations. Because if your nervous system is accustomed to lack, abundance can feel threatening. If you are accustomed to rejection, love can activate fear. Then you need to start with the foundation, by changing the I, by rebuilding a sense of safety in a new version of yourself. This is the chapter that either liberates you or irritates you. Neville said that there is no one to change but yourself. And people hear this as an accusation. But the meaning is different. It is an invitation to reclaim agency. Look at how much energy people invest in trying to change the world. Convincing a partner to mature, convincing a boss to appreciate them, and convincing family members to understand them. And often it ends with a person feeling tired, unappreciated, and rejected. Neville would say, "The world is not complex. You are trying to act from the position of an old identity that still believes it must fight." According to Neville, change happens from within. It is not pretend someone loves you. It is become the version of yourself for whom being loved is natural. And then relationships either realign or fall away, and new ones appear. Not through magical control of people, through changing the field in which you live. What is sometimes called online, "everyone is you pushed out," can be understood maturely. Other people play roles consistent with how you feel about yourself and what you expect from the world. When you change the core, the roles no longer fit. And then life begins to write a new script. This lesson also has a strong counterpart in Christian mysticism, that the most profound transformation does not consist in fixing the world, but in awakening a new consciousness of being within oneself. In the mystical tradition, the motif of the divine I Am returns, not as a slogan, but as pure presence. This is one of the most beautiful ideas in Neville's teachings, because it removes the burden of control from a person. Neville said that when you accept the state of fulfillment, life will build what he called a bridge of incidents, a sequence of events that leads you to the material result, often in a way you could not have predicted. And this is important, because most people get stuck on the question, how? How is this supposed to happen if I have no connections? How is this supposed to happen if the market is challenging? How is this supposed to happen if that person does not want me? How is the favorite weapon of the old identity, because how keeps you in the logic of limitation. Neville taught that your job is the state, and the how is the consequence of the state. When internally you are someone who already has it, your movements change, your decisions are different, your courage is different, your intuition is different. And the how begins to assemble itself from small elements, a conversation, an invitation, an impulse, a coincidence, an accident that stops being an accident. This is also the moment when people often say, "But isn't this just psychology?" And Neville would reply, "Even if it is, does it change anything if it works? If the inner state changes your actions change consequences, and consequences change life. Do you have to call it magic? You can call it the law of consciousness, and use it." If you really want to understand why Neville was so sure about I am, it is worth seeing that a similar tone runs through many traditions, not as identical teaching, but as an intuition that consciousness is closer to the source than form. In non-dual philosophy, especially in traditions that speak of the unity of self and the absolute, there appears the famous statement, "I am the absolute," understood not as ego, but as the recognition that the deepest I is not separate from the whole. In this perspective, I am becomes not so much a sentence as a recognition. Existence itself is primary. In Hermeticism, you will encounter the idea that reality is mental, and that consciousness is the key to shaping experience. You do not have to take this literally as physics of the universe. It is enough to treat it as an instruction. If you want to change the world you experience, start by changing your mind. In Christian mysticism, you will find the language of pure being and the understanding of the divine name as something not external but closest. What Neville did was translate these intuitions into practice, how to use consciousness in everyday life so that life begins to look different. And here, a critical clarification, so as not to fall into a trap. This is not an invitation to spiritual narcissism. It is not, I am God, so everyone must serve me. It is, I am consciousness. So I stop giving my power to fear, history, and other people's opinions. This is mature, quiet, stable, and precisely because of that, it is effective. Now we move to the part that brings everything together, because if this remains only a theory, nothing will change. Neville was a practitioner. He wanted you to apply this. First, one principle: do not try to generate a state by force. A state is not born from pressure. A state is born from a decision of identity. This is a subtle difference. Pressure says, I am not, I must become. Decision says, I choose this as truth, even if I do not see it yet. During the day, instead of asking, is this already working? Ask yourself, who am I being in this situation? If you are in a state of lack, you do not need to scold yourself. Just notice, oh, I return to the old, and return to the new, as one returns home, not to an obligation. And in the evening, enter the practice before sleep, but in a way that does not sound like a robot. Do not repeat things 8 times like spells. Make it an experience. Lie down, relax your body, feel that the bed is holding you. And now choose one sentence that leads you into a state of unity and power. Let it be simple. Let it be soft. Let it be yours. You may repeat something like, everything is within me, or I am the source of life in my experience, or my consciousness leads me toward good. It is not about the words themselves. It is about what happens inside you when you say them. Repeat, but as if you were sinking deeper, as if each repetition were less about sound and more about feeling, as if you were sliding into a silence in which there is no longer a discussion with the mind. And in that silence, fall asleep. And if doubt appears, do not fight it. Treat it like a cloud. The cloud passes and the sky remains. Doubt is a phenomenon. I am is the background. And one more efficient thing, if your desire at the beginning is too charged, because it awakens obsession, longing, and tension, then for some time do not work on the desire itself. Work on yourself as the source. On calm, on certainty, on safety in the new identity. Because when you stabilize the foundation, desires come more easily, like a natural addition, not a struggle. The law of assumption, in its most profound sense, does not tell you how to acquire things. It tells you who to become so that things stop being acquired and start being natural. Neville leaves us with a demanding but straightforward message. The world is not your enemy. The world is your echo. If you want to hear a different sound, do not shout louder at the echo. Change the voice at the source. And today you can take one small step that is bigger than you think. Before you fall asleep, do not ask for a miracle. Enter the state in which a miracle is a normal consequence of who you are. Fall asleep in the truth about yourself, not in a story of lack. And then observe how life begins to arrange itself as if someone had shifted invisible levers. That may be precisely what you are doing, not with your hands, with consciousness.